man nickname. It'd just be a pure baby face. He said people can see right through it. They've never been in a real fight. Things of that nature. Did you see any of this? What were your kind of feelings if you did indeed see any of this interaction between Road Warrior Animal and Becky Lynch?
I scanned it very quickly based off the run sheet for this week's show. I had heard a few of my friends had texted me and said, "Hey, did you hear what about Joe?" And I think my quick take on it is that there are some of us that are verbose and others that aren't. Joe oftentimes reacts out of emotion, and but let's preface this whole discussion with it's pretty hard to argue with the success the Road Warriors have had. So that's not, in my experience, it's pretty unlikely it's coincidence or just luck to have that length of a career and that impactful of a career. I can still remember as a kid watching, the Superstation show, 6:05 on Saturday nights. I had read about the Road Warriors prior to that, but to see them, and you hear those first few chords of Iron Man hit, they were just about as big as you can get in the business. So I think sometimes, especially when you're having this generational discussion, right? Today's generation versus Joe's generation, my generation, that sometimes people talk past each other. And I've always tried to figure out the best way to talk in a way that we can understand each other as opposed to just talking past each other. Because when you do that, nobody's listening to anything. And it just becomes a, hey, fuck you at some point, very quickly. I think in the few comments that I had read, it seemed to me that the points that Joe was trying to make, he may not have made as eloquently as he could have, but his point well taken. I mean, understand that his generation, again, my generation, we were in the same generation. He's a little bit older than me, but our success in the ring was based off of what was coming in the door tonight. What were the ratings on the pay-per-view? What was the ratings on last week's TV episode and the segment that you were in? So it was a pretty quick turnaround as to whether or not you were worth the money you were being paid and whether or not the promotion would continue to push you. And I think what's happening here in the discussion, again, in the scant comments that I read back and forth between those two, is that they're both talking from their own base camps. So I understand what Joe's saying because I was there and lived it. But I also can see the point that she's making based off of what we see in the industry today. But the industry today versus the industry then are like, the NFL in tiddlywinks. Somebody is playing in a third grade play versus the King of Hollywood or Queen of Hollywood. They really are two very vastly different genres. So they're both making valid points. And again, like I said a minute ago, talking right past each other. If this just becomes hey, 2 and 2 is 26, and fuck you if you don't understand that. It's pretty hard to make any leeway, but it seems to me like a very strange conversation. If we're going to talk about let's say roses, okay. I don't know the first damn thing about roses, but I just popped in my head. If we're going to talk about roses, the first thing I'm going to do is bone up on roses and talk to people that I know roses. Both of these, Joe and Becky Lynch are both, from their own base camps, thinking they have a pretty strong grasp and command of what it is they're talking about, and they probably both do. But if you're talking about roses and I'm talking about petunias, going to talk right past each other. You know, it's and again, they may be genetically the same, you know, one gene away from each other. I don't know. I'm just popping those two things in my head as names of flowers. Am I making sense? Like,
yes.
You know,
yep.
it seems to me that they're like talking right past each other, as opposed to trying to find the common ground, which I think is a huge part of what's wrong with the business today. Is that, you know, that everybody's just going off on their own thing, and they're listening to, you know, this 24-year-old writer who has all the best intentions, I'm sure, but doesn't know the first damn thing about the business. And the other entity is coming from, in this case, Animal is coming from a place where the business was pretty much chiseled out of the stone, and you knew your spot, you knew your role, you knew where you were on the card. You know, but again, it's comparing roses to petunias, and as long as they continue on that tangent, they're going to continue talking past each other.
Also, which was a funny line that Becky Lynch put, because some dirt sheet had a headline like "Road War Animal thinks Becky Lynch should back off" or something like that, and Becky said the first 4 words are a lie. So "Road War Animal thinks" is a lie. Very funny line, you know, obviously in play with her character too. So, you know, very funny line. And Road War Animal came back and said, you know, you kind of are taking one bit. I said, you're the best female wrestler today. And, you know, the different places obviously are looking for salacious headlines at different dirt sheets and different wrestling websites. They wanted to kind of make it play one guy off of another. In this instance, play one man off of one female. So do you think that has a lot to do with it as well, that they're both kind of reading headlines, not really listening or reading the interviews?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so, you know, the two of them are feeding sites and sheets and people a way to make money. And, you know, they're talking right past each other. It's comical to me in one sense that, you know, so this is what we've devolved to, right? So now, instead of having a conversation like we are right now, from now on, just, you know, send me your questions via whatever site or sheet, and then I'll respond to a couple words that you say in that, and we'll just keep scuttling it back and forth between us like that. My guess would be that the conversation would probably be pretty convoluted, and rarely hit the point. But, you know, when I had a thought in my head there for a second, it's gone, but it'll pop in a second. When you're doing this, if I'm just going to base, you know, my comments back to you off of 2 or 3 or 4 words, or, you know, some kind of like, what's the best gotcha line I can hit you with? Again, completely missing the relevance of the conversation. One thing I can tell you about, I've known Joe for a long time. Joe's not a guy that just goes out and criticizes. He's not going to go out and just say, hey, you know, saying you suck. That's not Joe's MO. If he's saying something to you, it's because he's trying to be helpful in some way, whether he articulates on that properly. You know, something we can all argue over that, you know, how somebody articulates a point. But you can see that again, and I'm my input on this is based off of me reading, you know, 5, 6, 7 minutes worth of back and forth between these two. But, you know, the responses back were like, okay, like the first take the first 4 words of that comment. Okay, it's cute. You know, it's got a bit of a bite to it. But ultimately, is it endearing her to anybody, especially Road Warrior fans? Is it giving her access to somebody who may be able to teach her a thing or two? Or is it just become, I'm going to go to the writers and get, you know, some kind of spiffy, or come off the top of my head or whatever, little jabs that I can hit you with that depending on your generation, somebody that's, I'm guessing, 25 to 30 down is going to side with Becky Lynch. Somebody 25, 30 and up might side with Joe. So again, talking right past each other. There's nobody moving the needle. It's just, you take a slap at me, I'll take a slap at you, and then you slap back at me, and I'll slap back at you again. To me, I'm way too busy to get bogged down in that kind of a conversation. It ain't a conversation. It's a Twitter war. It's a Facebook war that is putting money in somebody else's pocket and doing nothing for my career. And I would say doing nothing for either of these two's career. It's just, let's just keep on flapping, and, eventually this one will stop or that one will stop. And then when they do, the other, each of them will think, see, I won that. He backed out. She backed out. It's, what is the goddamn point? What really, where's this going? Like, are we going to cure cancer with this? Are we going to solve the border situation with this? Or are we going to, reopen the government tomorrow with this? It's just conversation for a conversation that everybody's staking claims on, as if any of those problems are going to be solved by it. Newsflash to everybody involved on both sides. Nothing's getting resolved over this. It's just a conversation of two people speaking right past each other.